No one calls his name anymore. No records remain. No social security number, no home, no friends. Ethan is now only himself and the shadow he just stepped into. Beneath the city, deeper than abandoned subway lines, a heavy metal door groans open amid mechanical clatters and a light so white it cuts like a scalpel. They don't introduce themselves. They don't welcome him. They just look as if measuring an unidentified object. A hand gestures. He walks into a room with no windows, no clocks, no time. In the dead silence, the single chair in the center feels more like a throne for the condemned. He sits. A screen lights up in front of him. No images, just a line of text. Are you ready to never be human again? Not a threat. Not a choice. Just the truth, naked and cold. Ethan doesn't blink. He doesn't nod. But the system understands. A soft click, and the door behind him slams shut. Darkness. A voice emerges not from speakers, but from somewhere inside his skull. Memory is a burden. Identity is an illusion. If you wish to survive, forget everything. The test begins now. Ethan draws one last breath as if diving into the ocean floor of a reality no one ever resurfaces from. The elevator made no sound as it dropped. There were no buttons inside, no floor numbers, no emergency lights. Just Ethan, standing beneath a dim flickering bulb, feeling gravity shift with a weightless sensation in his gut. The descent wasn't smooth, it trembled slightly, like the whole mechanism resented the intrusion. The doors opened with a hiss. He stepped out into silence. A long corridor stretched ahead, carved in smooth concrete, lit by pale blue strips running along the ceiling. No footsteps echoed, no machines hummed. Just the sterile stillness of something not built for humans but for what came before them. Ethan followed the narrow path. The air felt colder here, dense, like breathing inside an abandoned cathedral where something sacred or cursed had been sealed away. At the end of the hallway, two men in black suits stood beside a reinforced door. They said nothing. One simply placed a hand on the scanner. The door slid open, revealing the core. A vast chamber opened before him, impossibly wide, impossibly deep. Dozens of levels spiraled downward like an inverted tower, each ring lined with laboratories, cells, and something that looked disturbingly like operating rooms. Giant monitors pulsed with unreadable symbols. Somewhere far below, something moved, not walking, but slithering, heavy, slow, intelligent. Ethan took a step back. A voice, neutral, emotionless, spoke from a hidden speaker. You have reached Tier 7. Clearance accepted. Subject Ethan Cole. Initiate phase. He was guided by a silent escort through a series of corridors. Rooms passed by in a blur. One held a vat with something floating, its eyes open. Another showed a suit melting onto a man's skin like black oil. No one explained. No one looked at him. He wasn't a guest. He was a variable. In a glass room, a machine awaited. Compact, black, spider-like, its limbs unfolded as he entered. It latched onto his forearm without warning. Cold needles. A flash of pain. Then silence. A screen blinked on above. Tracking implant successful. Neurofirewall engaged. Human baseline overwritten. He wanted to ask questions. But part of him already knew, this wasn't training. It was reprogramming. Finally, they brought him to observation room Theta. Inside was a single seat and a wall of monitors, none showing normal surveillance. Instead, blurry recordings of lights over deserts, discs in the clouds, humanoids vanishing in flashes. Real footage. Grainy. Unfiltered. A single line of text ran beneath them, looping endlessly. Area 51, Subject 0037, containment failed. Do not engage. Then another, White Sands incident still under review. No survivors recovered. Ethan stared. And then, the lights cut. The door locked behind him. From the speakers came the same voice as before, colder now. We do not teach. We do not protect. We observe. If you understand that, proceed. Ethan exhaled slowly, stepping toward the only lit screen left, one showing his own face, captured from above, time-stamped, classified. Welcome to Tier 7. The van didn't have windows. It moved in silence, gliding across unseen roads. Ethan sat in the back, facing a blank wall, hands resting on his knees. There was no driver, no briefing. Just coordinates burned into the neural interface recently embedded in his skull. Every few seconds, he could feel a pulse like a distant sonar ping echoing somewhere deep inside him, marking progress. When the van stopped, the door clicked open. Suburban heat spilled in. He stepped out into an ordinary street. Houses stood in neat rows, each with trimmed hedges, humming air conditioners, and the occasional sprinkler painting arcs across faded lawns. Children's toys scattered on driveways. A dog barked in the distance. Nothing was out of place except everything was wrong. Ethan's interface flared. He followed the signal. 4 houses down, he paused. A 2-story colonial with light blue siding and a red door. Mail stacked neatly. A car in the driveway, license plate registered supposedly to a man who died in 2003. Curtains moved upstairs, but no shadow passed behind them. The neural pulse turned into a steady hum. Ethan walked by without stopping. No contact. No interference. Observe only. 3 blocks over, another alert. A small playground. Rusted swings. A seesaw frozen mid-tilt. A woman sat on a bench, reading a newspaper that hadn't been printed in a decade. She wore a sun hat, oversized sunglasses. Beside her, a boy who didn't move blinked in unnatural patterns too fast, one slow, repeated exactly. Ethan stood under a tree and watched. The woman turned the page with robotic precision. Wind passed, but her hat didn't shift. No one else came to the park. No birds. No traffic. The longer he stood, the less the world made sense. Time stretched, and something behind reality seemed to press outward, testing him. He stepped away. The interface dimmed. Test passed. At dusk, they led him to the edge of the city, an industrial block filled with storage units and forgotten infrastructure. There, through an unmarked metal door, was a room filled with static. Not sound. Visual static. A fog shimmered across the air like disrupted pixels. And standing in the center was something, not quite shaped like a man. Tall, elongated. Skin that bent the light. Eyes that flickered in frequencies the human brain struggled to process. It didn't move. It simply existed. And then Ethan realized it was watching him. Not through sight. Through thought. A surge passed through his skull, a jolt of images that weren't his, a city made of glass, stars spiraling in wrong directions, machines older than time. Emotions not felt, but broadcast. Wonder. Grief. Calculation. He dropped to his knees. Not from fear but from scale. Then it was gone. The fog collapsed inward. The air returned. His interface rebooted. The van door opened behind him, silently waiting. Ethan stood, hands shaking, heart quiet. His first contact hadn't been an introduction. It had been a warning. Night fell without warning. The van stopped again, this time in the hollow underpass of a long-abandoned highway. Concrete pillars loomed like forgotten gods, soaked in rust and ivy. Ethan stepped out. The lights overhead buzzed weakly yellow, sickly, unreliable. No voices. No vehicles. Only a faint vibration underfoot. Then a door opened in the wall. Not a normal door but a slice in reality itself. The edges shimmered like heat waves, and as Ethan stepped through, the air changed. It was heavier, thicker, buzzing with frequencies beyond hearing. The world bent inward. He entered a corridor that pulsed with strange light. The walls weren't built, they grew, shifting in texture like living skin. Fluorescent veins glowed beneath the surface. The deeper he walked, the more his implant dimmed, blinded, blocked, or perhaps overwritten. At the end of the corridor, the market revealed itself. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It whispered. Rows of shadowed stalls stretched into impossible depth. Beings moved with grace and precision, some draped in robes, others made entirely of reflective matter. No names. No languages. Transactions occurred through gestures, vibrations, light patterns. A thin mist drifted along the floor, swirling with every footstep like it listened. Ethan blended into the movement, careful not to draw attention. But attention found him. A presence approached, not walking, but gliding. Insectoid, elegant, tall as two men, with limbs that bent in alien rhythm. Its eyes were crystalline, refracting light in pulses. It didn't speak. It simply extended one long, jointed hand and dropped something into Ethan's palm. A fragment of metal. Small, warm. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat encoded in silver. Then the being was gone. Vanished between shadows. Ethan stared at the object. No markings. No weight. Yet as he held it, images blinked through his mind, flashes of documents he'd never read, symbols that felt familiar. Coordinates. Schematics. A face. Not human. He slipped it into his jacket. Security agents moved past him seconds later, dressed in black, scanning the crowd with handheld devices. Ethan kept walking, head low, heart hammering. They didn't stop him. But they were looking for something, or someone. He exited the way he came, but the corridor had changed. The walls no longer pulsed. The veins were gone. And when he emerged back into the night air, the van was already waiting. Inside, the lights were off. The seat was cold. And for the first time, the voice in the speaker said nothing. The implant remained silent. But the fragment in his pocket hummed, low, steady, alive. Whatever the market had been, it hadn't been a test. It had been an invitation. The night stretched on without stars. Ethan sat alone in a sterile room. No windows. No clocks. Just the soft hum of unseen machines and the low ambient pulse of his own breathing. The fragment in his pocket still pulsed steady, patient, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. Eventually, the wall shifted. Not a door, but a panel that slid open with no sound. A figure entered, not a man, not quite. Dressed in black, taller than usual, with a presence that dimmed the room around him. The face was featureless, like a mask melted smooth. And yet, Ethan felt watched down to the roots of his memory. The observer didn't speak. It simply sat across from him. Between them, a table formed out of nothing. Light bent around it like it didn't belong. Then, the observer reached forward and placed something on the table, a single page, blank. Ethan stared. Words began to form, not ink, not typed, but alive. Shifting language. Symbols he couldn't read but somehow understood. The page told no story. It revealed paths, versions of Ethan. One where he was erased. One where he never saw the lights in the sky. One where he became something other than human. And one, only one, where the page stopped writing as if the future was still being decided. The observer tapped a finger on that space. Ethan felt it in his spine. Then the voice came, not from the creature, but from the air itself. You have breached the veil. There is no turning back. Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. The fragment in his pocket grew warm. Another image flashed across the room, no projector, just light, and thought. It showed Earth not as it is, but as it is seen. Energy grids mapped across continents. Unmarked facilities beneath oceans. Massive objects buried in polar ice. Moving. Observed. Then came the faces. Dozens of them. Humans. Non-humans. Hybrids. Some familiar from old footage, others impossible in form. And behind each face, a word written in static, tracked. The observer stood. Its body shimmered for a moment like it was glitching out of sync with the room. It didn't walk away. It vanished in a blink, leaving Ethan alone, the table already gone, the page no longer visible. Only the fragment remained, vibrating like a second heart. The lights dimmed further, and a hidden door opened behind him. No command was given, yet Ethan stood and followed the darkness. Whatever Mib was preparing him for, it wasn't to serve. It was to choose. The passage was longer than it should have been. Ethan walked for what felt like hours. No lights. No sounds. Just the subtle vibration beneath his feet, like the world itself was humming a song only machines could understand. The walls were smooth, metallic, slightly curved, like walking through the inside of a vast engine built by something that had never known gravity. His implant flickered. Then it burned. Suddenly, he wasn't in the hallway anymore. The space around him widened without transition. One step he was walking, the next he was standing inside a chamber too large to exist underground. A black dome stretched above, starlit but artificial. The floor rippled with shifting symbols, like language trying to escape the surface. And at the center of it all was the signal. It wasn't sound. It wasn't light. It was structure. A lattice of frequencies hovering midair, vibrating between dimensions. It looked like a sculpture made from frozen thunder, constantly collapsing into itself, yet never vanishing. Data pulsed through it in waves, too fast to read, too ancient to decode. Ethan stepped forward, and the implant in his head screamed. Not in pain but in protest. The signal wasn't meant for him. Not yet. But something inside the fragment in his pocket responded. It pulsed, flared, and then merged. The metal shard leapt from his coat, floated into the signal like it had always belonged there. The structure cracked. Just slightly. A single thread of data broke off and spiraled toward him. It struck his mind not gently. In an instant, Ethan saw what lay beneath the veil. Not secrets. Not conspiracies. Patterns. Hidden transmissions embedded in TV static. Morse bursts buried in seismic activity. Reflections in water that blinked back. Not messages to humans but to others. Left running long after the senders vanished, or went into hiding. But then he felt something else. Something watching the signal. Something that had been waiting for it to be breached. And now, had noticed him. The dome trembled. Symbols peeled from the walls and rose into the air, orbiting him like debris caught in zero gravity. The chamber was no longer stable. The frequency was unraveling. Ethan turned to leave but the entrance was gone. The walls had folded inward, turning the space into a sphere of noise and pressure. A voice distorted and fractured echoed through the chaos, "You're not cleared. Not yet. Not now." Then silence. Everything dropped. The dome. The light. The signal. Ethan fell, landing hard on a cold floor. Fluorescent lights flickered above him. He was back in Tier 3. The same corridor from days ago. A janitor mopped the floor. A coffee machine hummed down the hall. No one reacted. No one saw him fall from nowhere. He looked down. The fragment was gone. But the echo of the signal still pulsed in his veins. This was no longer initiation. It was trespass. And something, was coming. They moved him without a word. After the signal incident, Ethan was quietly escorted through a different corridor, one colder, quieter. Tier 4 wasn't on the original blueprint. None of this was. His new room was smaller. No cameras. No mirrors. Just a single bed and the constant hum of white noise, artificial, but almost soothing. Almost. At night, he stopped dreaming. Or maybe the dreams stopped pretending. The voices didn't speak in language. They pulsed, like pressure behind the skull, pressing memories into his mind that didn't belong to him. A city under two suns. A birth in zero gravity. A shape in the water that never cast a reflection. He saw them all. Lived them. And when he opened his eyes, he couldn't remember which were real. One night, the lights flickered. Then they stayed off. The door unlatched by itself. Standing in the frame was a man Ethan had never seen before. Pale, thin, wearing no MIB uniform, no ID badge, nothing but a coat too old for this decade and eyes too tired for this century. He sat down across from Ethan, like they'd known each other in another life. "You felt it, didn't you?" the man whispered. "The signal. It didn't call to you. It recognized you." Ethan said nothing. "You think they brought you here to teach you? To train you? But that's not what MIB does with anomalies. They study them. And when they can't contain them," the man looked up at the corner of the ceiling, where a camera should have been, "they erase them." He slid a thin black device onto the floor. It crawled toward Ethan like an insect, alive, mechanical, silent. "That will get you access to the vault," the man said. "Below Tier 7. No agents. No guards. Just records. Things even they tried to forget." Ethan picked it up. It was warm. Before he could speak, the man was already gone. No footsteps. No door sound. Just gone. The lights came back. The hum returned. And somewhere beneath his skin, the signal pulsed again, stronger this time. He wasn't being watched anymore. He was being remembered. This wasn't just initiation. It was awakening. And the real story was buried below Tier 7. The signal has touched him. There's no doubt now, Ethan has become part of something far beyond the MIB, beyond any system humanity ever thought it controlled. What he saw wasn't the future. It was memory. Not his own, but theirs. Those who were marked. Those who once heard. And now, the echoes are coming back. The truth no longer hides in secret files. It waits beneath Tier 7. And Ethan has just been given the key. From this point forward, he's no longer being guided. He must choose his next step, or vanish from the system entirely. If you, too, feel the signal getting closer, leave a trace in the comments. We read every one. And if you're ready to follow Ethan deeper, subscribe to the channel. The next episode will take us where no one was ever meant to go.